The role of gratitude and mindfulness in sustaining relationships. Falling in love can be easy. Loving someone for a long time is harder. Many people say that something important has disappeared from their relationships. That in the beginning, everything was intense words, gazes, touch. But over time, routine, fatigue, and sometimes indifference set in. Love began to resemble a pattern, safe, perhaps even necessary, but no longer moving. Does this mean the feeling has faded? Not necessarily. Often, it's not love that fades, but our ability to notice it. In a daily life full of duties and noise, it's easy to overlook something that was obvious at the beginning, that being together is not a given, that the presence of another person is not a permanent fixture of the landscape, but a gift. This is precisely where the concept of gratitude emerges, not the grand, solemn kind, but the quiet, everyday kind. Psychologists have been studying its impact on relationships and well-being for years. Robert Emmons and Michael McCullough have shown that people who practice gratitude are not only happier, but also maintain better interpersonal relationships. In one of their experiments, partners who, for several weeks, wrote down things they were grateful to each other for, reported greater relationship satisfaction and a stronger sense of connection. Gratitude doesn't resolve conflicts, but it changes the way we look at each other. It helps us notice what might escape us over time. That someone made tea for us again. That they reached out first after an argument. That they remembered something we said in passing. I remember a story from a woman who said that for a long time, she was convinced her husband no longer loved her. He didn't say it out loud, didn't surprise her, didn't show affection in the way she needed. She was ready to leave until the day she came home late and saw a sandwich wrapped in paper on the table with a note. "You didn't eat anything again. Will you at least eat this now?" And suddenly, as she put it, a wave of tenderness hit her because she understood that he had loved her all along. He just spoke a different language, and she had stopped hearing him. Such moments, though small, can be breakthroughs. They show that love doesn't disappear. It just gets covered by fatigue, automatism, daily unspoken issues. Gratitude is like emotional vigilance. It reminds us that the other person doesn't have to, but can. And if they want to, it's worth noticing. The second important element that increasingly appears in research on relationship durability is mindfulness. This refers not only to a meditation technique, but to an attitude, being present in the current moment, without judgment, without immediate reaction, without projecting one's expectations. Research by Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer shows that mindfulness in relationships fosters lower stress levels, a greater sense of security, and fewer impulsive reactions. People who can be emotionally present hurt others less often, not because they are perfect, but because they see the person, not just their behavior. Interestingly, mindfulness also has a very practical dimension. Couples who practice mindful listening, they don't interrupt, don't judge, don't immediately offer advice, more often report relationship satisfaction and less frequently experience emotional loneliness. In a world of quick messages and instant replies, value is found not in speed, but in quality. Do we really hear what the other person is saying, or just what we want to hear? One research participant recounted that she once argued with her partner over a trivial matter, his not taking off his shoes. After the argument, she wanted to talk to him, but he was silent and cold. Only later, calmer, she said, "It wasn't about the shoes. I just wanted you to show that you were coming back to me, not just to the apartment." This sentence moved him because he saw that behind the complaint was longing, and that he had reacted to the form, not the meaning. Isn't it sometimes the case that in a relationship, our unconscious needs talk to each other, and not we ourselves? Can we be mindful not only of words, but also of what lies beneath them? Gratitude and mindfulness share a common trait. They don't require a revolution. You don't need to go to workshops. It's start over, change partners. Sometimes one conscious thank you, said not out of politeness, but from the heart, is enough. One sentence, what brought you joy today? Asked without rushing. It's not about turning life into a sentimental diary. It's about not letting love turn into a silent routine. And gratitude and mindfulness are like flashlights that illuminate places where it's getting dark. Are we ready to notice the other person every day? Not just as a housemate, but as a human being with their doubts, history, longings. Love that lasts is not the kind that never changes. It's the kind that is seen anew, again and again, despite the years. And to see it, attention is needed, and gratitude. Hedonic adaptation and how to counteract it. In the beginning, everything seems unique. The first morning together, the first laugh in the middle of the night, the first argument ending in reconciliation. At that time, it's hard to believe that what moves us so strongly now could one day become ordinary. But over time, we begin to notice less, appreciate less, pause less. Something that was once amazing becomes normal. This is how the human brain works. And this is how one of the most influential phenomena in the psychology of emotions operates. Hedonic adaptation. Hedonic adaptation means that after a certain time, we get used to what initially evoked strong emotions in us, both positive and negative. A new house, a lottery win, a promotion at work, falling in love. All of these fade in our perception over time, not because they objectively lose value, but because our brain stops reacting to a stimulus that becomes repetitive. Researchers Sonia Lyubomirsky and Ken Sheldon have shown that even major positive changes, like marriage, the birth of a child, a new relationship, bring an increase in happiness that, however, returns to its baseline after a few months. It's as if happiness has its own base level, and our attention gets used to everything that once seemed extraordinary. Does this mean we are doomed to indifference? That every relationship, regardless of the initial emotional intensity, must eventually fade? But it does mean that if we don't understand the mechanism of adaptation, we might mistake it for the end of a feeling. And instead of working on presence, we might start looking for new stimuli, new people, new experiences, a new beginning. One could say that hedonic adaptation is like a dimming filter. It doesn't take away the relationship, but it takes away the ability to perceive its freshness. That's why it's so important in relationships to consciously cultivate variability of attention. That is, the ability to constantly see anew. How to do this? One of the simplest ways is through so-called appreciation practices. These are exercises that involve deliberately paying attention to what is good in the relationship, even if it seems ordinary. Instead of waiting for emotions to arise on their own, we learn to summon them. Research shows that couples who regularly recall important moments from their shared past share positive memories and revisit places that mean something to them, maintain a higher level of commitment and closeness. Isn't it strange that we remember more about things that hurt us than about those that moved us? Or perhaps it's not because memory works that way, but because we stopped talking about the latter. An example. A couple I know had a habit of writing a short message to each other once a month. What I'm grateful for today is that you are here. In the beginning, it was a bit awkward, sometimes trivial, but after a year, they each had 12 such messages and both had saved them. In moments of crisis, they returned to them because what once seemed obvious regained its shape. It can be one sentence, one gesture, one look back at a shared vacation photo. Another way to counteract adaptation is by doing new things together. Research shows that couples who undertake new activities, even small ones, a new walking route, a new recipe, a new game maintain higher levels of dopamine, which is responsible for feelings of pleasure and engagement. It's not about constantly surprising each other. It's about not letting everything become automatic. Even a conversation can be new if we ask a different question than usual. Even silence can be different if accompanied by mindfulness. Is there still room in our daily lives for curiosity about the other person? Hedonic adaptation is a natural process, but that doesn't mean we are powerless against it. We can weaken it, not with spectacular gestures, but by regularly reminding ourselves, why are we together? What once connected us? What still moves us in this other person, even if it no longer does so every day? It's also worth remembering that adaptation works both ways. The fact that we no longer feel an explosion with every smile from our partner doesn't mean something is broken. Maybe it means we are secure, and that now it's time for something else. Not excitement, but a calm, mature way of seeing each other. Can we notice today what in our relationship has become invisible due to habit? Do we have the courage to reclaim it, not by changing the person, but by changing our attention? Love that has survived hedonic adaptation is not perfect love. It's the kind that doesn't allow itself to be erased by repetition. The kind that knows how to remind itself, even quietly, the significance of perception and interpretation in everyday interactions. It's not just what happens that matters. Equally important, and perhaps more so, is how we interpret it. One person might fall silent because they need a moment of quiet. Another will perceive it as punishment. One might not call back because they fell asleep exhausted. Another will think, I'm not important. In relationships, we constantly interpret the other person's behavior. And although we rarely realize it, these interpretations can bring us closer or push us apart, build or destroy. Social psychology has long studied this phenomenon. Susan Johnson, creator of emotionally focused therapy, EFT, writes that the key to connection is not the partner's behaviors themselves, but the meanings they assign to them. It's not the gesture that evokes emotion, but its interpretation. An example. In one study, couples were asked to describe what they feel when their partner doesn't respond immediately to a message. Those with a stable sense of connection most often assume neutral or positive reasons, probably busy. Those who felt less secure more often attributed negative intentions. They're ignoring me. They don't care anymore. This difference in interpretation could completely change the dynamics of the relationship because thoughts generate emotions, and emotions, reactions. When we feel slighted, we react with coldness, and coldness creates distance, thus forming a spiral whose beginning was merely silence. Doesn't it happen that the biggest conflicts start from trivial things? Or perhaps not from the events themselves, but from the assumptions we made about them? That's why mindfulness of our own interpretations is so crucial in relationships. We often have no control over what the other person will do, but we do have control over how we read it and whether we leave room for a version of events other than our own. John Gottman's research shows that happy couples do not differ from others in the number of conflicts. They differ in how they think about them. Their interpretations more often include trust, the assumption of goodwill, and the intention to repair. In difficult moments, they don't think, they're doing this to spite me, but rather, they don't know this hurts me. It's a subtle difference, but it changes everything. One woman recounted that for years, she felt ignored when her husband left the house in the morning without saying goodbye. She thought, he doesn't even want to kiss me. He doesn't care anymore. Only during therapy did it turn out that he didn't want to wake her. Every morning, he would stand in the bedroom doorway, look at her for a moment, and whisper, I love you, even if she was asleep. For her, silence was a sign of indifference. For him, of tenderness. How many such interpretative mismatches occur in our relationships? In psychology, we talk about attribution errors, the tendency to assign specific, often negative intentions to others' behaviors. In intimate relationships, this is particularly dangerous because the closer the person, the greater the significance of how we interpret them. Are we still able to ask the question, what really happened and what did I add to it? Can we withhold judgment before reacting? This doesn't mean ignoring feelings. On the contrary, it's about recognizing them before they transform into a reaction. If I feel hurt, I can talk about it. But I can also leave room for the possibility that my hurt was not necessarily the other person's goal. Research by Marshall Rosenberg, creator of nonviolent communication, shows that relationships in which partners have learned to separate facts from interpretations exhibit greater stability, fewer conflicts, and higher levels of empathy. What does this look like in practice? Instead of, you never listened to me. When I was talking about work, you were looking at your phone. It made me feel sad. Instead of, you don't care about anything. You didn't reply to my message. I started to worry that you don't care. Such statements don't shut down. They open up because they don't accuse, but show an experience, and an experience can be accepted if one doesn't feel attacked. Are we able today to talk about what we feel, not as a truth about the other person, but as our internal reaction? Perception and interpretation in relationships act like a filter. If the filter is distorted by past hurts, fatigue, or insecurity, the image of the other person can become illegible. And then it's easy to conclude that there's no love between us. Meanwhile, it might just be that our way of seeing has changed, not the person themselves. Love is not immune to misinterpretations, but it can become stronger if we start noticing them, if we give ourselves and the other person space for correction, questions, dialogue. In our daily interactions, are we still curious about what the other side truly thinks and feels? Can we acknowledge that our interpretations are just one version of the story? In relationships, it's not about always understanding each other. Sometimes it's enough not to assume the worst. Micro habits. Supporting lasting bonds. You don't need grand revolutions to change something in a relationship. Sometimes a small thing is enough. A word spoken with intention, a question genuinely asked, a hand placed on a shoulder when words are no longer sufficient. A growing body of research shows that what sustains love over time isn't grand declarations, but small, regular gestures. Today, we often call them micro habits because they are minor, repetitive, yet capable of building a deep bond. Positive psychology and the neuroscience of relationships today focus not on what breaks relationships, but on what strengthens them. And it turns out that the greatest impact comes not from spectacular events, but from what we do every day without fireworks. John Gottman, who analyzed micro-behaviors in couples for decades, even created a model called the emotional bank account. It states that every small gesture of tenderness, interest, or attention is a deposit into the bond's account. And every act of spite, indifference, or silence is a withdrawal. Couples who have stable relationships maintain a 5-to-1 ratio. 5 positive interactions for every negative one. Interestingly, it's not about the absence of difficult moments, but about them being immersed in a daily dose of good. What micro habits really work? Here are some of them. Empirically tested, but also deeply human. Greeting and parting with intention. Research on relational rituals highlights moments of transition. Mourning, returning home, separating. Couples who pause, even for a moment, to look each other in the eyes, say, "Have a nice day," smile, or hug. Create an emotional microclimate that reduces cortisol levels and improves a sense of security. This isn't about technique, it's about being noticed. Daily question about how the day went. It sounds trivial, but in practice, often neglected. Gottman described this as an emotional check-in ritual in couples who practice short, sincere conversations about what happened. Greater empathy, better understanding of the partner's perspective, and increased resilience to conflicts are observed. Touch, holding hands, placing a hand on the back, an unprompted hug. Neurobiologists have shown that touch lowers stress levels, increases oxytocin, the bonding hormone, and builds a sense of belonging. And most importantly, it requires no words. Sometimes it's touch that says, I see you. You are important. Small surprises. This isn't about gifts. It's about gestures that show, I'm thinking of you. A favorite mug placed by the bed in the morning. A note left with a joke. A song sent for no special occasion. Research shows that surprise combined with positive emotion strengthens the brain's reward system and restores freshness to the relationship. Appreciation. A daily practice of noticing. Thank you for taking out the trash. I liked how you reacted to that situation. I'm glad you're here. Seems like nothing. Yet research indicates that frequent expression of gratitude in a relationship correlates with higher satisfaction, commitment, and durability of the bond. In one interview, an elderly couple who had been together for over 40 years said, "Every day I told her I loved her, even if it was quiet between us, because I wanted her to know. Not just when things were good. Not all micro habits need to be romantic. Sometimes it's simply a way of saying, I'm here for you, without using words." One woman recounted that she felt most loved when her partner plugged her phone in to charge before she even thought about it. That was their own language, invisible to others, yet very clear to them. Do we have such languages of our own? Do we maintain them? Or do we let them disappear among more important matters? Micro habits work because they are natural and don't require great effort, but they have power when they are regular. It's a bit like watering a plant. Not once a month with a large amount of water, but daily, a little at a time. That's why micro habits are more effective than so-called grand remedial gestures. Because they aren't a reaction to a crisis, they are everyday care. It's also worth mentioning a phenomenon called emotional synchronization here. Research shows that couples who regularly share their experiences synchronize their biological rhythms more quickly: sleep, pulse, facial expressions. An affective resonance forms between them, the ability to co-feel. And it is precisely this co-feeling that makes a relationship a space of safety. Do our daily rituals strengthen this resonance or weaken it? Sometimes 5 minutes a day is enough, but 5 truly present minutes, of course. It's not about turning a relationship into a set of tasks to check off. It's not about a checklist. It's about intention. Am I present? Do I see the other person? Does my way of being with them daily say, you are important? Love that lasts is not based on grand words. It's based on something happening between us every day, even something small, but alive. And maybe this is the question worth asking ourselves. Did I do at least one small thing today that builds a bridge between us?